Last two lectures we were involved, or we had involved discussions on the hardware and the programming model on top of that hardware, on the hardware. So we had two things, right? We had the hardware model, and then on top of that we had the programming model, and then we had this execution model of fetch, decode, and execute. And then I showed you, or rather I explained to you what in details what goes inside the hardware, how what are the things, basic elements inside the CPU, and what's the compilation process. This compilation process has to do with like compiling the program that you have written, and then loading it in memory, and then asking the program counter to point and then start executing. So this is a quick recap of the previous two lectures. So today, before starting anything, so I just want to validate what I told you last time. So remember I told you about an object file and an exe file, right? So let me just show it to you. Can you guys see the screen, the terminal?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yeah. So I have a simple program called frozen.c. So yeah, let me remove these two things. Yeah. So all that I'm doing in this program is just printing a single line. I'll come to this, all the syntax of the program later on. But for now, just think this is my program. This is a single one line program. Now, I want to run this program. How do I run it? I just compile it and run it. I will again come to the details of the compilation later on. And then when I say it runs. Now, what has happened under the hood? Under the hood, all the steps that I have described to you in the last lecture, compilation, then loading, sorry, the compilation, then assembler, then linker, and then finally loading. All this has happened in just a click of a second, and then you are able to run your code. So now I would show you what this program translates to and what your CPU actually sees. This is what your CPU actually sees. Sorry, not, oh, sorry. Yeah, so I have used an utility called object dump. So you don't have to worry about that utility. So just look at this, this code here. That single line of code, that single, not single line, as in there are 3-4 lines with a main function. So that small program got translated to this huge file here. So if you just, there are 3 columns here, 2 in red and 1 in blue. So if you just look at the middle column, you can see all that you can see are numbers, right? You can see a 2F, you can see a 6C, then 2D, 7, 8. So all these numbers, this is the middle column is what your CPU sees, this middle column here. This is how your instructions go to your CPU. They are simply a bunch of numbers. That's all. Now, there are 2 more columns here, one on the left and one on the right. So the what is the one on the left? The left is the left columns are the locations in your memory, in your RAM, where these numbers are located. Numbers representing the instructions are loaded. For example, if you just pick up, let's say this 400250, so there within that flat RAM memory, right? So there is this location number 400250 where this instruction, right, with this number 6F is loaded. So for the program counter to execute this instruction, it has to just ask the ask the bus to get this instruction in the CPU, and then decode it and feed the necessary data to the ALU and execute it. So the program counter will go through each of these instructions one after another. First it will see this instruction, then it will point to this, then point to this, then point to this. So these are the instruction addresses which are loaded in your RAM. The last column here is for your reference. You don't have to, the CPU does not see this. The CPU also does not see the first column because the first column is only for the program counter, right? The program counter locations. The CPU only sees the middle column. Yeah, so the last column is for your reference, as in this, these are all the assembly level instructions. Remember, I told you that assembly is something which is in between machine code and a human readable high level code. So this is that, this is that column. Machine code is this code, the numbers, and this human readable code is the assembly for your reference. So if you see this particular instruction, I don't know what it is, but it is OUTSL. This just, the number representation of this is just 6F. So you see this, that each of these instructions have a numerical representation here, and this is what the CPU will see. So your object, so your executable file, you will just hold this sequence of numbers, and this sequence of numbers will be loaded in these memory locations in your RAM, where the program control will point to. Any questions here, guys? Feel free to ask. Yeah. Why am I seeing Appaji's name in question?
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Number is one element in the program.
Sorry.
Say 400238 or whatever is one element in the program. Like, what does 400238 represent?
Yeah, 400238 represents the address in the RAM, in the shelf number where this instruction 2F is located. So it will go to that shelf number and pick up 2F and feed it to the CPU's circuit
So
or
it
the
is an
CPU.
element of the program.
It's an instruction. See, it's an instruction of the program. See, what is the instruction that I wrote in my program? The high level instruction was printf, right?
Right.
This was the high level instruction. But that high level instruction cannot run as a single instruction on the CPU. Sorry. That this high level instruction cannot run just like a single instruction. A lot of smaller instruction goes in creating this high level instruction called printf.
Okay. Understood, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, guys?
So it means that those numbers, whatever instructions we write, it gets represented as these letters and numbers.
Exactly.
So could you repeat what the middle column represents again?
So the middle column represents the representation of your instructions, right? These are the instructions, right? So these are the instructions which your machine can run. So, but you cannot feed the instructions by just their names. You cannot say XOR you cannot feed the names to the CPU, no? Because the CPU can only understand numbers, right? So each of these instructions have to have a numerical equivalent. So that is the number representation of the instruction. So those numbers are what goes to the CPU, and the CPU will execute that instruction. These instructions are for just you. This text representation is just for your reference, but the equivalent number representation is for the CPU's execution.
Sir?
Is that clear? Whoever was asking this question?
Yes, sir. Yes, it's clear.
Good. Yeah.
So shouldn't the machine instruction be in binary code?
I agree. I mean, CPU can have this basic circuit, right, which will take a number and convert it to binary. What is it? Well, it's not a big deal, right?
Okay, like hexadecimal to binary. I mean, what we're seeing is hexadecimal, right?
See, you don't even need a converter. I mean, see, this is a sequence of bytes, right? Bytes. So once the CPU reads the sequence of bytes, this is a single byte, let's say, byte. Why is it a single byte? Because there are two hexadecimal values. There is a hex is for 4, right? 4 bits represent one hex, right? One hex number, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So this means this is a single byte, right? 2F is a single byte. So when the CPU reads this single byte, it can look inside individual bits and say which is 1, which is 0. That is the binary equivalent of this, right?
Yeah.
You don't need a converter like you can directly read the byte and look into the bits inside.
Yes. So, and I had another question. What is the function of assembly level code? I mean, neither user understands it nor CPU. Why is there an intermediate like that?
Yeah, why is there? Yeah, good. That's a very good question. So why is there an intermediate code? Because there are crazy programmers who can write directly code in assembly. That's one thing. If you want to have a complete control on your hardware, or if you want to go to the very basic details as in the machine instructions, then you can use the assembly code directly to express your program in. And assembly codes are a very efficient way to execute your program. So assembly, you can also write your code in assembly, by the way. So people who know assembly directly writes the program in assembly. So just like this, so remember I wrote a program, this C, and then it has a very high level instruction called printf, and then it got translated into a lot of assembly code. So why has this explosion of assembly instructions happened is because I have gone from a high level to an assembly, right? And from assembly to machine code. But if I directly chose to write in assembly, I could have written this program in lesser number of lines.
Yes, sir. So, but assembly
It's
code is
for
platform
efficiency.
dependent, right?
Assembly is very much platform dependent, because your CPU, because if you have let's say it's a different type of CPU, that CPU might not understand the other instructions, different instructions. For example, this instruction could make sense to only one type of CPU. This may not make sense to others. That's why assembly programmers, you won't find many assembly programmers, because it's very system. It's not a very generic general programming for format. It's very machine dependent, instruction processor dependent.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sir, the third column, you said it's assembly code, right?
Yes.
You said it would be easier to write it in directly in assembly code if you know that, but
Yes.
it looks so big here.
Yeah, because this is generated from a high level code, right? But if you choose to
Okay.
directly write it,
Okay.
remember, yeah, the analogy here is just assume that I don't know the language. I don't know the Telugu language, even though I should know, but I don't know it. Let's say I hire a translator. So whatever things I am saying in my language, he will convert it to Telugu, right? But he will do this very nice grammatical translation, and then he will maybe add more and more things, right, to whatever things I am saying. So
Okay.
if a native Telugu speaker interacts with that person, he will feel like he's not speaking in his language, like he's not speaking in the local lingo. He's speaking in a very pure Telugu, and then the language is like complicated and stuff. But if you directly know that language, you will express it in lesser number of lines, and then maybe in a more efficient way. Something like
Yes.
that. Something
Yes,
that's
sir.
the
Okay.
difference between high level to assembly and directly writing it in assembly.
Fine, sir.
Good. So I think no more questions on this, right? So this is what it is like. This is what your programs finally are finally come down to. Just this sequence of numbers. That's it. Your exe will just contain this sequence of numbers, and no one in the world can make make sense out of this if you give them this list of numbers only. Like, what was the logic? What was the program all about? Okay. So having said that, so today what I plan to do is I just plan to show you the basic anatomy of a C program. So what goes inside writing a basic C program? If I ask you to just write one line of code, how should you write a code about? And everything will just be built on top of this basic program. What's the basic structure of basic syntax of a C or anatomy of a C program? That's where we will start with today. Okay. So let's go line by line here. So the first that you see here, the first character is a hash include stdio.h. So what does this mean? So what the program is doing here? The program, what it is doing is it is just printing a line, a printing a text on the monitor, that is on your terminal. So that is what this program is simply doing. Yeah. Do I have some chat questions? If you have questions, you can ask, guys. I mean, because I cannot like switch between terminal and then chat windows.
Sir, can you repeat, sir?
Repeat what?
Include studio.h.
It's not studio, it's stdio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So I'll explain what it is. I mean, I will explain it in much more details. So yeah. So what you want this program to do is you want this program to print something on your terminal. What is that something? It's a single line that you want to print. But for that you have to invoke something, right? You have to invoke a certain, you have to invoke a block of code to do that, to go to the terminal and do the printing for you. So what is that printing is simply it is going to an output device and writing something on the output device, right? So what is the output device in this case? It's your terminal or it's your monitor. So that thing is done by you could think of printf as a function, and function is a block of code. So that particular task of going to the terminal and printing it out, that particular task is being done by this block of code or function. Function is also function, block, and block of code is the same thing. So that particular task is being done by this printf function. Now, do you see in this program anywhere I have described what printf is? I have simply used the printf function here, right? I've just used it here. you nowhere see in this program what is the actual block of code that goes inside printf. That is how the printf takes the text you have entered, how it gets hold of the display device, and how does it print it on the screen. You don't see this code anywhere. Why? Because you don't have to write the block of code that goes inside printf. This thing is already provided to you by the C language. This is something which is provided to you by a header files. You could think of header files as this pre-written code blocks or pre-written block of codes which helps you do some tasks, right? Yeah. So printf is one of these tasks which is described or which is there in this header file called stdio.h. stdio stands for standard input output. That's why in the very beginning of your code you include this. You say that I would be using certain blocks of code located inside this file, this header file, and that's why I have to include that file to be part of my program. Because if I don't include this, right, let's say if I don't include header, let's see what happens if I don't include this and I try to compile. See, it says printf is not declared, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but if I include it now, if I include it, that thing just evaporates. See, I don't get any error. Why? Because that particular block of code called printf, is inside this header file called stdio.h. As simple as that. And the moment I include this header file, I get access to printf, the block of code representing printf, and I can simply use that inside my program. So this include stdio.h is called a preprocessor directive. So what's a pre-processing step? So I think you guys remember the pre-processing block, right? Which I skipped in the last lecture. So the pre-processing block is something which comes before your actual compilation starts. That's what the pre-processing step is. It comes before the compilation, before your actual compilation starts to happen. And this preprocessor, what it does is it looks for the header files. It looks for this hash includes or anything that follows the hash, and it does something with those. I'll explain what it does something, and then it modifies your source code. The preprocessor looks for the the lines starting with hashes in your source code, and then after it looks at those lines, it creates a new file. It creates a new version of your file, and that version is what is being processed by your compiler to create your executable. Now I will show you what that version looks like, the version that your preprocessor creates. So this is how I can invoke this. Now the task that we want to do is we want to look inside the modified file after our original file goes through the pre-processing step. So I can invoke the preprocessor through this command called cpp, just like the way I was invoking the compiler using GCC, right? So I can invoke the CP processor using cpp. Okay, so let me just compile this. Sorry, let me just pre-process this and write it to a file called frozen.i. Now just look at this. Your file remains, your original line that you wrote is this, and it has added all these lines. The preprocessor has added all these lines to your original file, and it created a new version of your file. You guys see this file, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So now what are these extra lines that your preprocessor added? So when I spoke about printf being inside this header, So what the preprocessor will do is it will go inside the header file, and you see this. These are all locations in my hard disk. If you see this, user include, these are all locations. These are all paths. Like in Linux, you access a particular location in the hard disk through a path. So these are all paths. So what are all these paths? This path represents, one of this path will represent where in your hard drive is the printf, that the code blocks for printf is located. And during compilation, what would happen is the compiler will pick up that code block, it will compile it, and then it will create a file, object file. I mean, it will create a sequence of numbers just for the printf. And it will link those sequence of numbers with your actual code, that is your main, where you have written that line. So it is doing this linking with the object file of printf and your own object file, that is that is the file that you wrote by yourself. So this happens in the linking phase, and then finally your printf, it appears as in the printf has run inside your program, because the sequence of numbers representing printf are linked to your program. Is this point clear, guys? This is a very important point.
So could you please repeat the linking part?
So the header file, so someone would assume that header file itself contains the printf code blocks, right? It would have been much easier if you just if the header file contains all the functions, whatever. For example, the code blocks for printf could have been located in the stdio.h header file, and whenever I say include, what would have happened is the preprocessor would take the code blocks from that file and make it part of our own source code. Right. But yeah, this would have been a better thing, but then this is not exactly what happens. What happens is the header file, the preprocessor will expand the header file, and the lines, the expanded lines will just contain the location of the code blocks of printf on your hard disk.
So what you're seeing right now is all the commands that are contained inside the header file, and this is the program that we have typed in the what do you call it? It is called skimming through the file, looking for the command that we are using, printf, right?
Yes, printf, and then it will point to, then there will be one line which will point to the location of printf in your hard disk.
Okay, right. Right. Okay.
Why does it need the location? Because when the compilation happens, your program will also get compiled along with the file of printf will also get compiled. That is the code for printf. And then both of them will have different object files, right? The printf will have its own sequence of numbers. You will have its own sequence of numbers. Finally, the linker phase, what the linker phase will do is take both the sequences of numbers and merge them into one exe, so that when you run your code, it will appear as if the printf is also part of your code.
Okay, so it essentially, okay, got it. Yes,
got it, right? Good.
Yes, sir, thank you.
This is what the preprocessor does. It will expand the header file and include these extra lines, which are the locations of the functions that you have used inside your code, and then compiler later on will go to that locations, compile those files, make an object file, link it to your object file, and then create your final nice executable file.
So just another doubt. So what are the .i files for?
.i is for just for that. I mean, just for the preprocessed file. I have started with a .c file, right? So then the .c file gets converted to a .i file, and that .i file is seen by the compiler and then compiled.
Sir, what's the use of the command vi?
Vi is for a vi editor. Just like you use Notepad, right? You say Notepad and then you write the file name. Similarly, vi is an editor which says vi, open this file.
So I have a doubt. The header files are included with the header files are included with the OS?
With the compiler.
With the compiler.
The header files are included with the compiler, and it depends on what language are you using. If you're using a C language, let me show you this. So you guys have heard of CPP, right? C++.
Yes, sir.
So C++ is, yes, it's like a subset of, it's like a superset of C. It's like C's elder brother, right? It's a more powerful and bigger and bulkier than C. So let me just use one of the headers that is inside a CPP, that is a C++ header. So this is one of the headers of CPP. You don't have to exactly know what it is.
Using namespaces.
Sir, you missed .h.
We don't need that now. This was pointed to me by the previous batch actually. I mean, if you use .h, I mean the recent C++ versions, you don't have to use .h. It's
Yes,
fine
sir,
if you
Turbo
just
and
for
Dev
IOStream, right?
But
Yes.
in code blocks, we don't.
Yeah, it depends, man. I mean, for some you need and some you don't. But you just follow it. It will be either of this. Either you use h or don't use h. You will be able to use it.
So shouldn't there be a semicolon?
Let me see. Yeah. So now if I try to compile it, you will see an error here saying this header file, no header, no such file, because this is a C file and I'm using a C compiler to do it, right? So now if I just change this file to a CPP file, let's see what happens. And I use a CPP compiler, which is G++. See, now it will, okay. Yeah, CPP has this requirement actually.
So we can't use void in C++.
Yeah, that's it.
So, but we used to do that in school.
Because that
It has evolved after that.
Turbo C++,
Oh.
but
Yeah.
the newer versions don't
Exactly.
accept void.
See, now you see if I do this, now I can run the code, right? Because that header file is a part of CPP, it's not C, but the header file for C is still there. The studio.h is still there. Sorry, I also mispronounced it, studio. It's stdio. So why it works with stdio still is because C is a subset of C++, right? So that header file is included as a part of CPP as well. So you do it. So the compiler doesn't stdio inside a CPP file.
So we can use
That's
C++, but not the other way around, right?
Yeah, because C is the superset now of C. That's why. So this is I mean, through this we saw that these header files are language dependent. It depends on what language you are using. That language would have those headers. It's not always dependent.
So, like in the
Yes.
file paths, we saw stuff like x86_64. I know that it says something about
Yes.
computer architecture, but what exactly, sir? I mean, it comes up a lot.
Do you guys want to know about this? Because I got a feedback in the previous batch saying I digress and then you guys lose interest after that. Should I explain this? What is x86?
Yes, sir.
Like,
How
if
many
others
shares
are
are-
okay, then.
Yeah. Because see, what happens is now, who am I speaking to? Can you just say your name?
So my name is Anirudh.
Yeah, Anirudh. So what happens is, see, you might know stuff, and then there will be someone who is just starting on this computing part, right? So for them, when you do these discussions, right, then for them things get boring, and then they start to maybe lose confidence. So that's why we have to be we have to think about those people also, who doesn't want to know this, who just wants to know programming. And if we discuss this, maybe things will it will get complicated for them. But let's let's keep the explanation simple for them to also understand. So
Sure, sir.
when you go for x86, right? I didn't get this question asked in the previous batch, so I guess yeah, you asked, so I'm giving you the answer. So this x86 64, this stands for what kind of instruction your machine understands. So just go back to this frozen.asm. These instructions here, right? These instructions are x86 assembly instructions. If let's say it would have been some other instruction set. So there is an instruction set called there is an 8085, right? There isn't something else, some other instructions called 8085. There is some other instruction sets called MIPS. So if your system would have been an MIPS system, then these instructions would have looked different. It's just like a C and a C program looks different, right? Similarly, from a very hardware perspective, the hardware has also their own languages. This is an x86 language, assembly language, which your processor understands. There might be other processors which understand some other languages, and those languages are called by those names, that MIPS or whatever. x86 is the language of this Intel processors, the latest Intel processors.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so x86 64. Why is it 64? Because it's a 64 bit.
64 bit. Yeah, that I understand.
Yeah, it's a 64 bit instruction set. So the keyword here is instruction set. Instruction set is some instructions that your CPU. Okay, good. So where was I? Yeah, I have explained what the header file is. Header file contains all the functions that you use in your programs, like the code to input and output or math. Yeah, header, just like input and output, there are header files to do math operations like log, power, and similar stuff.
Sir,
Yeah, someone is on unmute. Please mute. Yes. Was there any question from someone?
sir, can you open the terminal?
Yes.
Yeah, so for the preprocessor thing, you use the command cpp, right? So in the second one,
Yes.
cpp frozen.c.
Yeah.
CPP stands for like C++ edit
No.
thing.
CPP stands for C preprocessor. This is the C++ processor, G++.
Okay, but here you used frozen.cpp, right? Then aren't both the ones?
Yeah. See, now I will come to the next point here. So dot something is the extension of your file. For example, if you want to open, if you want to work with Notepad, can you open a .mp3 file? Is it possible to open a .mp3 file on Notepad? It's not, right?
Yes,
Similarly, for your compiler has to understand, your compiler can only process files with certain extensions. For example, let me change my extension to frozen.c. Let's say, okay, I have to change it actually back to C now. Okay, let me just, instead of making it frozen.c,
MV,
yeah. Let me just say frozen dot something. So now if I go ahead and try to compile it, it will just say unrecognized format. See, unrecognized format. That means that .cpp is the extension of the file. So your file that you write, right? Just before you give it a .c extension, it's just like a text file. But once you give it a .c extension or a CPP extension, that means your compiler will be able to compile and execute that file. I mean, compile that file and create an executable out of it.
okay.
So that's why extensions are important.
Sir, I had doubt. Like, can a C++ compiler open a C file, .c file?
Obviously, because again, subset and set, right?
So the C processor CPP is different from this extension .cpp, right?
Exactly. CPP is a tool, you could say. It's a software which you have invoked, and CPP is an extension of a file.
Yes.
These are two different things.
So yesterday, the teaching assistant he did something differently, as in to run the program. I mean, even to compile, I think he used a -o and then he changed the name.
Okay.
Then he didn't use an extension. So could you explain that process?
Let me show that to you yet. First, let me remove these two things. Okay. See, when I'm doing GCC and when I'm doing frozen.c, right? Okay, first let me remove this thing here. GCC frozen.c. Yeah, first if I list the things in my directory, yeah, so these are the files in my directory. Now let me just compile my file now, frozen.c. Now if I do an enter, you see a new entry in my directory, right? What is that new entry? A.out. Yeah.
A.out.
So what it means is, whenever I did a compilation, that means it has created an assembly. It has created an exe file. And by default, the name of the, if you don't give the compiler the name of the executable file, it will by default save it as A.out. Just like once you save your things in your software, right? It by default saves as untitled, right? Untitled dot something. So it's similar to in the compiler also things are similar. If you don't give it a name of an executable, it will save it as it will save it as A.out. And if you want to run this executable, you just have to say .\A.out and it will run. But now maybe you don't want this, right? You don't want to name your executable this, you want to name it something fancy. So let's say now if you want to name it something else, then all that you have to do is you have to say -o, and then let's say you name it something else, right? So now if you go and again you see a new executable under this name. So now if you want to run it, so just say, now you can run it. So -o, using -o, you can you can rename your executable from its default name, which is a.out. That's it.
So, but a.out is still there.
It's not there. It's not there. Don't worry. I have once I remove it. Let me remove it. Let me remove this also. Now it's not there, right? So now when you compile it, it will see. Now you don't see a.out. You'll see only that.
So the -o, and then that file name creates a copy of that thing, is it?
Yes, not a copy. So what is happening
Compiled
is,
version.
yeah, it's an exe. I mean, when you have a software, right? Softwares have to have an exe name, no? Similarly, this is also whenever you are compiling, it's creating an executable file, right, for you to run. So you have to name that executable file with some name. So this is the name that you choose.
Right.
For example, first can be one name again. So see, this is the another name that I have created. So it's like,
now if we try to open that OLF, then
yeah,
what
it will
comes?
still be there because you have created it from a previous run. Why will it just disappear, or why will it not work? Because you have created it, because it's a fully packed executable. Now it has all the sequence of numbers inside it packed nicely. So now no one can like alter with it. I mean, if you want to run it, just say dot backslash it. I mean, say /Olaf and it will run.
So, sir, what place does this name change to? Where does
Sorry?
it change? You shifted from Frozen to Olaf, so where does it change?
Where does it change, as in?
I mean that this name, it
Sorry.
gets
I will
changed
name it
where?
something else. Oh, wait. Yeah, so let me now see. Now there is no executables here, right? All the executables will be in green. Just remember this. All the executables will be in green. Now there are no executable files here. So now if I just say compile, just say frozen.c and then say o, and then let's say prog, right? Now if you do see what is this doing is, this part here is doing the compilation, right? So what is this part doing? This will create an exe for you. But then this second part here, you want to say, okay, if you are creating an exe, you better create that exe with this name and store it in my hard drive. So now if you do this, if the compilation is over, now that means that whatever exe was created by the compilation step in this here, it got renamed, it got named to prog. That's it. See, every time during compilation you are creating an exe, and then you can give it a new name. It's not like the previous exes that you have created, they will automatically change. Their names won't change because during the compilation you have given them that names, right? To put it very simply, you can just take the exe, right, on your Windows machine, and then you can make multiple copies of it, and then you can give each copy a different name. Can you do this?
Yes, okay.
If you have a vlc.exe, you can say vlc.exe, copy it into, let's say, 10 locations and give each location a different name. So this is what it is. This is what we are doing. We are creating different executables with different names, but the sequence of number inside each of them is the same.
So .out is not an extension, right? It's just the name, default name, right? A.out.
Yeah, it's a default name. Yeah, you
It
don't need an extension for an exe.
.out is not an extension, right?
It's not an extension. Yeah, because prog does not have an extension, right? So exes does not need an extension. Remember this. Exe files in Linux, they don't need an extension to run.
Sir,
I have a question. If you have two separate programs, and if you
Yes.
don't rename
Then
any,
you'll be screwed. Then it will be a problem for you. It will overwrite.
Overwrite.
Yes. It will simply overwrite, right? Both of them will have the same name, and whichever you compile later, that will be the version of a.out.
Yes.
So if you overwrite it, what will happen to the previous program?
What happens if you rename vlc.exe to x.exe? If you instead of that software you put something else there, so the whole thing will change, right? The
Right.
previous thing will be it will be gone, right? You have replaced that executable now,
Right.
because you have used the same name.
Mhm.
Okay, good. So this thing is clear, right? I actually wanted to bring this point up later, but anyways, we covered this already. It's good. Okay, so let me again go to what else. So this thing is clear, right? Executables and then renaming them. What's this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Not actually, but that's something for a future lecture. What do you want to do in future, Shantanu? What is not clear?
Someone was asking something.
Okay, someone was asking something. Okay, good.
Sir,
Yes, yes.
sir, I want to go to that part when you used C++ compiler to compile a C program, you use
Mhm.
printf in there, but in C++ we use cin and cout.
See, remember this. C++ is a superset of C. C++ is the elder brother of C. So whatever is there in C is visible to C++. Printf is visible in C, right? So it will also be visible in C++.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, you choose to use C in Cout, it's fine. I mean, but printf is also there for you in CPP, but it is not. But C in Cout is not there for you in C.
So then we can directly use C++, right? But why are we now using C?
See, we don't see. I mean, C and C, they're the same. They sound the same. Yeah. So what happens is C is a very. I mean, it's a basic language to start with. C++ has a lot of extra features which you don't need now.
Okay.
If you're just starting to learn to ride a cycle, right? You get the most basic cycle. You don't directly go and buy a 50,000 watt cycle, right? So that's what it
Okay,
is. You
okay.
just buy a basic 2,000 rupee cycle and start to ride, and then you go and get a racing cycle and then start your other
Okay.
day
Yes.
life.
Yes, sir.
That's the equivalence. Yeah. Okay, good. So we think that part is done. So what else is left? So one thing that I told that I'll finish it in 1 hour is not going to happen anyways. Okay, so we are done with the first line. Now let's look at the second line. What is the second line here? So let me not just use this. Let me use void here. Second line. So what it says is, see, you will end up writing bigger programs with a lot of functions, right? Functions as in code blocks. But all those different things that you write, right? For example, you have a software, right? You have a game engine, and then game engine, so I mean, you have a lot of source file for the game engine. Some source files or some programs are running your graphics. Some programs or some source files are working with the sound. Some are working with the key presses, right? So if I just leave all these source files scattered everywhere, is your program going to work?
No, sir.
Is your game going to be up ever?
No, sir.
Why not? Because there has to be this single entity which will weave all these different codes that you have written into one place and set the execution order or the sequence order. As in, when you load a game, then first thing that your login screen comes up, then the sound starts, then the engine starts. So all this sequence, right, of all the programs that all the source codes I have written. So there has to be one point which will weave all these things into a single program. So this is where main comes in. Main is that one entry point to your program from which your execution starts. If you don't have main, then what is going to, everything is going to be chaos, right? No one knows which function to execute first. You have 100 different code blocks, 100 different source files. You don't know what to run first and what to run second, for that matter. So that's why you have to have this master record, right? Or this master function, which is kind of the thing which will nicely thread in all these different functions, all these different code pieces, and then say this runs now, this runs after this runs after this. So this thing, This sequence of your program execution is what is set inside the main function. So your program cannot run without a main function. Let me try this. So let me, instead of main, let me rename it as XYZ. Let's see what happens when I compile the program. Sorry. See, what happens is you get an error saying there is an undefined reference to main. That means your forget about execution. Your compiler reports the error itself. You don't have a starting point for your program to run. That's why I'm not going to compile your program also. So that's why main is required. It's that one function which you have to put in every program from where the execution actually starts. So now if you have main here, so then main can call a lot of other functions. For example, you have fun here, fun2 here, fun3 here. You have written all these functions here, right? So then main can access all these functions here. So you can set, okay, you can do this fun here, then fun, and then fun2. So you see, so all these functions are outside main, but then their sequence is set inside main. This is how the program will behave. That's how the program will execute. So that's the importance of main. Without a main, your program is not going to run. Is it clear, guys?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So main is the starting point of your program. It's the execution point of your program, entire program. Now, if inside main, let's say you have called a function which is, let's say, printf again, right? So printf is not it's defined in the header file. So now what your execution, this one, the CPU will do is, whenever it sees a printf, right, it will go inside that that part, right, where within an instruction sequence, there will be some sequence for printf, right, because you have combined all the object files into one object file. So then whenever it sees printf, then it will go to that section and execute, and then it will come back. So this is what happens, guys. See, let's say you have printf, you have one more printf, you have one more printf. Sorry, not one more printf. You have sorry. So then you have a function here. Yeah. See, what happens during execution is you know this is the starting point, right, which is the main. The main holds the instruction. The main holds the address of the first instruction of your program. Just remember that, where the program counter points to. Now, whenever the main sees a function, which is this printf is not inside main, right? It's somewhere outside. So whenever it sees this, then what happens is, within the big sequence of numbers, there will be sequence of numbers representing printf. So your program counter will go to that sequence now, which has printf located there. So once it has gone through all the instructions representing printf, it will come back. It will come back to the main, and then again it will see a function. It will see a function called func. Now it will go to the sequence of instructions that represent this part, the function part, within the big sequence of instructions, free sequence of numbers, and then again it will come back to main. So main is this master which branches your program counter to different locations within your big sequence of numbers, from where once you are done with those sequence, you come back and then you go for the next sequence of numbers, which represents the next section of code.
Sir, what about the return
What about the
0? Yesterday we mentioned.
I didn't get it.
Yesterday we mentioned return bracket 0. Return 0 we mentioned in the yesterday compiling, no, sir.
Correct. I'll come to that now. What is a return 0? But at least the point of main is clear now, how the execution happens, right? You see within your big sequence of number, whenever you see a function, then you go to that sequence of number within the big sequence where that function is located, come back to the main, and then again when you see a function, again go back to that part of the of your object file where that function is located, and again come back once you're done with that function. So that's what the function of main is. Okay, good. So now I will come to what the return stands for. Any question here, guys, till this point?
Sir, what is void?
What is?
Void. Void means there, right?
I'll come to that. That's where I will answer the return part. No? Wait. Before that, just look at these 3 points here. So this is how your thing happens. Pre-processing I have explained. Compiling also I have explained. What is compiling? Compiler is taking your code, converting it to assembly and converting it to those assembly instructions to a sequence of numbers. What is linking? Linking is taking different sequence of number from different source files, different object codes, and then combining them to one sequence of number. These 3 steps are absolute. This will be there in the exam, guys. So I'm just again confirming with you. These 3 steps are clear, right? Processing, pre-processing, compiling, and linking. Guys, refrain from chatting within you, please. At least till the lecture is on. After that, you can do that. Yes. So is this 3 steps clear? Absolutely.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
it's crystal clear.
Yes,
Good.
sir.
Okay, so I have already explained what is compiling and linking using GCC. Yeah, another subtle point here. So whenever I was doing this, right, whenever I did GCC and frozen.c, I got the executable created for me. Okay, it still does not have happened. Okay, sorry, I don't have a function definition, right? Yeah, so whenever I do this, it creates an assembly for me, right? That means it is creating a ready to go assembly. I can just go and go ahead and execute it. But if you remember from the previous lecture, there were a lot of steps for us to get from the source code to this a.out, isn't it? You guys agree on this, right? There is at least 5 or 6 steps now.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but do you see me manually executing those steps? Do you see me calling the CP processor, and then for the loader I have to call, for the linker I have to call LD, for the CP processor I have to call CPP? Do you see me typing these files to create the executable? Sorry, typing these commands to get to the executable? You don't see this, right?
Nice.
Why you don't see this is because GCC is like the GCC has this, it's like a blanket thing which will cover all these things internally. It will invoke the CPP, invoke the compiler, invoke the linker as well to create the executable. So it is doing that for me. I don't have to explicitly, because this is the sequence you always end up following, right? So you don't have to manually invoke each of them. But then if you want to know how each thing inside that behaves, you can manually go ahead and call the respective command to do that respective step of compilation. Is this clear?
So what does LD do?
LD is, it will just load different object files. Just search, I forgot the syntax actually. So if you have multiple, so object file is with an .o extension, right? So if you, I think
Right, yeah.
I have an object file, yeah. So if you see this frozen.o, right? So then what LD will do is you say LD, then frozen.o, then will be other object file, for example, f.o. You can simply put all the object files together and then create an executable out of it. It will link all the object files together. And the linking is quite simple actually. What it sees is, it sees within this, okay, so the starting sequence of number is this, right, which contains the main. Now it will see, okay, this sequence of number wants some other sequence of numbers which is in f.o. So it will take all the sequence of numbers from f.o and make it part of frozen.o. And it will do this similar packing, taking the other object files and making part of your object file which contains the main function. And that way you create the final executable, which is one big object file.
So can you repeat that implicit function thing? I had some network issue. I couldn't listen to that.
See, there are a lot of steps, right, from which you used to go from your C file to your exe file, right? There are at least 5 or 6 steps: pre-processing, then compiling, then assembling, then linking and loading, right?
Yes.
But when I just did GCC, and then if I do a frozen.c, I got the exe in a second, and then I can run this exe. So all the steps are happening without my knowledge. Did you see me typing CPP, typing the load linker separately? You didn't, right? So what was happening is GCC is like this blanket call, which will call all of these different steps for me. It will do that for me under the hood. I don't have to invoke separately.
So I was asking about that implicit function. You defined another function, right? Function dot that thing.
Which one?
Previous.
I don't have
think
any
that was an
C.
error saying that the function that he had inserted was
There
not
is no
defined.
implicit function. See, when I do this, yeah. So when I do this, right? If I type just function, you are talking about this, right?
Yeah, yes,
When
sir.
I do this and I just compile, it doesn't compile, man. It will just say there is no function of this type because I have not declared it right anywhere. Neither is it in the header file, neither is it in my source code. So the compiler will simply give up, saying you better write a definition for this function. Otherwise, I am not going to compile your program.
Okay, fine, sir.
Yeah. Just remember that thing, guys, that GCC is doing all the thing for you. The compiling, loading, not loading. Loading is done when you just type the exe. When you just say, do I have an exe? Yeah, when you just say prog and then say enter. Once you do an enter, the loader will take the sequence of numbers that is inside prog executable, load the sequence in memory, point the program control to the start of the instruction, and then start executing. So all these things are happening just with a single enter. Okay, good. Okay, so one thing, yeah, GCC I have explained, compiling and linking I have explained, compiling, linking, compiling. Okay, good. So what's an IDE? IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. So what I was using is I was using a basic terminal, right? What is the basic terminal? I was using the simple VI editor. But then you might see, I'll show you what an IDE looks like. So this is my Python IDE. Can you see the screen, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
How do we make the frozen.o file, right? I will show it to you. Wait. See, this is my Python code, right? Now, if I want to compile and run it, I don't have to go to the terminal and invoke the compiler. I just go to run and then say run. That's it, and it will run. So under the hood, it is creating the exe, invoking the compiler and running the exe for me. So that's the benefit of an IDE. That's the one of the like most basic benefit, that you can simply, you have a nice like text editor wherein you can type your program, and then above you have a this drop down list where you can just go and run. Internally, that compiler, the Python compiler, who is the Python compiler, then Python runtime environment is getting called to execute your program, which you don't have to know about. You will just think like it's like I am inside this nice window and I am executing the program from here itself. So that's the work of an IDE. It's for lazy programmers. It's for people who are new to programming. I mean, expert programmers barely use IDE. I don't use IDEs for. I mean, I'm not calling myself an expert, sorry, but I'm just saying I don't use IDE for C programs at least. Yeah, so that's an IDE. Directives is that include thing. It is at the very beginning. I've explained it in a lot of details. Yeah, and that, remember that directive always starts with a hash. Everything that a hash is processed by a preprocessor. Main function, I've said what is a main function. I will come finally in the final like 5 minutes. I will explain what is the return about from the main statement.
So
Is what
will
you
we
write.
will we get these slides later, or
Why won't you, man? Why would we not give you these slides?
no? Like I don't
You
know where
would,
to access them. So if you've already sent, I
because
thought.
the website is not up yet now. See this,
Okay,
these people are setting it up, and then I mean, yeah, it will take time. I mean, it has a certain latency, and we cannot like you can't just expect it in the first day itself. So
Yes,
let's wait for the next week. If it doesn't happen, then we will make sure you somehow get this.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
So all this is will be available on eLearn, right?
Yes, everything is available in eLearn. I showed you that day, right? You for the previous batch.
So when I tried to open eLearn and access it, it showed invite only courses and all of that.
No, because you have not been added to the new eLearn. So there will be a new page for you created for your batch B1 and B2, and then someone has to add your email IDs to that, and then only you can access.
Okay,
Because
so it's
for
different
your
from
previous batch, they have the
from
email
Moodle,
IDs
right?
added to different website for eLearn.
It's separate from Moodle, right?
Yeah, it's separate.
Okay, thank you.
PyCharm is one of the best IDs for Python. Yeah, I agree. PyCharm is from a company called JetBrains. I mean, everything from JetBrains is really cool. Just try those. All the IDs are really, really nice.
So
C
I
line
had
is
a
one.
question about IDEs.
Yes.
So isn't Visual Studio also an IDE?
Yes, it is. But visual, there are two things. There is a visual code, VS Code and Visual Studio. VS Code is just a text editor. You can't invoke the compiler from inside VS Code. I think so.
Oh.
I don't use VS Code much. But Visual Studio is a much bigger software which has a text editor and a compiler also inside it, which you
Okay.
can compile and run from.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So one more subtle thing here, another important point. Yeah. So you see what's the use of a semicolon? Tell me in your program. What is the use of the semicolon?
Like to show it as a different line, I think.
Exactly. Semicolon serves the same purpose, just like a full stop serves the purpose in a text in a book. If you have written a book without a full stop, can anyone understand that thing? Is it possible for anyone to understand it?
No,
sir.
Yeah. So that's what the use of a semicolon is. Semicolon is a delimiter which says, okay, I am done with these statements. So program is just like a sequence of statements. So this is one statement and it ends with a semicolon. So you could simply write, you could write one more printf on the same line. That's not an issue until and unless you just differentiate it with a semicolon. All this will be
So does that mean like we can write all our code in just one line?
Yes, you can write all. One very important thing, guys. So let's say I have put a lot of spaces here. I have done enter, 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 and also this enter, enter, enter. When your compiler will compile this, it will remove every damn this one, all the other extra spaces that is there in your code. It doesn't matter. Even if a new line you have put here, right? It will also remove that new line. It will remove all this extra space, everything. And then even this extra space that is before the printf. So that's why it does not matter whether you write your code in one line or multiple lines. Eventually your program will remove, your compiler will remove those extra lines, extra spaces and pack it in one compact file and then start compiling it. So your program will be a sequence of statements just like this printf, and every statement has to end with a semicolon. If it does not end, that means that's not the end of the statement. And then sorry guys for checking my mail. Yes. So that's what a semicolon does in the program. Fine. So now one more thing here about the return. Just remember, everything that ends with a semicolon is a statement. Just like in a paragraph, everything that ends with a full stop is a line. So in program, the equivalence of a line is a statement. Okay, good. Two more things. So one is the keyword. What is a keyword? So again, going to an analogy. So you have a periodic table, right? What's a periodic table? Periodic table is just a nicely arranged assortment of elements, right? What's a compound? Compound is a combination of these elements. So if you want to build a compound, what do? You have to take these elements from the periodic table and fuse them together to create a compound. Guys agree on this, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So this is the equivalence of keywords in a programming language. Treat your program as the compound and these keywords as these elements. So these elements will let you express your logic. For example, that's why you see this void in green, because void is one of the keyword in C. This is one more keyword. If is another keyword, else is another keyword, while is another keyword. So these keywords are these small elements in your language which lets you express your logic. Just like you can create a compound out of periodic table, periodic elements. Similarly, you can create a program out of these elements. Without these elements, you cannot express your program. So those are the keywords. So in a typical editor, whenever you type in a keyword, it will be highlighted in a certain color. So that's why void you see, because void is a keyword, int is a keyword, if else while is a keyword. Is this thing clear? Concept of keywords?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Keywords are
So when should we use those? In what kind of situations we changes them?
You changes what?
Those keywords.
I didn't get you. You are saying in what situations do you use keywords?
Actually, int and void you are changing. Sometimes int and sometimes void.
Okay, I'll come to that. That's the final thing. main and about the main, right?
Yes.
Yeah. See, int and void are something to do with the return type actually. So whenever you execute a function, you would want something out of that, right? I mean, you execute some function, let's say, which calculates the sum of two numbers. You would require the sum as an output from the function, right? So that's why you say int and the name of the function. Int is the return type of that function, as in what kind of data does that function return to you. That is, it is returning back to the main for that particular data to be propagated to the rest of the code inside the main. So that is that int part. It is the return type of the function. Did it make sense?
Yeah. Next step, the others.
Good. Final thing now. Final thing, as someone was asking me, what is the return doing here?
Sir, about the others also, sir. You
Sorry?
explained about int and about void and if and else.
That this entire course is about that only. How you understand all the keywords. Why would I explain the keywords today only?
Oh, okay, sir.
You understand it, right? In every
okay.
class, you will be understanding some keywords. Today, you will understand if else. Sometimes you will understand while. So the whole 50% of the course is just to make you understand. Just like you study the periodic table, right? What each element does. In this course, 50% of the course, you will understand what a keyword does. What kind of things you can do with a keyword to make your logic work.
Okay.
Yes, you can use double main, I think. Yeah. So now finally, let's come to, remember when I said int function, that means it is returning something, right? But whom? So if I use a function inside main, and then I use that and I declare that somewhere, some function here somewhere. So that means if I invoke main in the function, if I invoke the function here inside main, I know that the function is going to give me an integer which I can use in the rest of my code, which will follow this line, right? In the other lines, I can use the data that is returned from function. But when I say int main, whom is main returning to? Because no one is calling main, right? Who is main returning to? Tell me.
Compiler.
No, not the compiler actually. So compiler is the static part, right? Once the exe is created, the compiler's work is over. The compiler is sitting on the hard disk. Sorry, yeah, the compiler is just like a software which you have just called and you have got the output.
So the operating system?
Yes, the operating system, correct. So when you say int main, that means whenever, first your main will execute instructions. If your main goes through all the instructions nicely, whatever you have written, let's say 100 printfs, other functions, other keywords. And then if your main has successfully reached the last line of your program, then it will return to the operating system saying, I have executed successfully. Why does it return to the operating system is because who makes the final execution happen? Tell me. Who loads the program and points the program and gives the counter to the CPU? That is who makes the program counter point to the location?
Operating system.
Loader. Did you forget the loader part? There's a loader, right?
Yes.
Which will take the exe, load it, and then make the the program counter points to that location. So that means whenever a program starts executing, once it has reached, and loader is a part of the OS kernel actually. So that means you could actually say that OS has spawned the process in memory. That is, OS has given OS has given life to your program by loading it in memory, because loader is a part of the OS kernel. So that means when your program has executed successfully, that is, it has reached the last line inside main, it has to give a feedback to main saying, I am successful in executing, and therefore you could be you could be happy enough that I have done it correctly and you don't have to worry about anything going wrong. But let's say your function has a lot of things, like assuming it's a game application and somehow your game crashed in between, right? Assuming the whole game logic is inside the main, and then after some line, what happened is you have accessed some memory which you were not supposed to access, but somehow your program counter got rogue, wild, and it went to some location which you were not supposed to touch. Remember, there was a difference of user space and kernel space. Remember, it went to some memory which was not supposed to access. What will happen at that point is your program will simply go to an error routine, and that error routine will return a error code to the operating system. Now the operating system would know, okay, the main was not able to reach the last execution point. That is, it has not given me a good signal. That means something wrong has happened. So in that case, the OS will go to its own memory area and check out if something has gone bad or not. And then if something has gone bad, it will try to make it good. So that's the use of return. Actually, when I do a void return, right, when I say void, you would say that I am not returning anything. Then how come the signal is going to the OS? When you do a void return in C, there is an implicit return statement which is added to the end. So at the very end of your let's say of your exe, there would be an implicit return added here. This implicit return would simply return, let's say, a correct or correct code saying okay. It will just return an okay, saying okay, I'm done, good. So this is what the return does in a main, the final return. This return might be explicitly written or it might be implicitly written. Implicitly as in it might be implicit, which just happens to get called once the main just leaves the execution or once the main has executed the last instruction. This is just a way of letting the OS know that everything went fine with the execution.
Sir, what if we keep a return statement like we keep it as int type and we return some integer value? Then in that case,
that's fine. Now, until and unless this see when this got executed, that means this is the last statement in main, right?
Yes.
So if your program has reached up to this point, that means you are good. That means your operating system will see it as a correct execution.
Yes, sir.
But if something happens in between, let's say there are like these 1,000 lines before main, and in one of those lines something very bad has happened. So your program won't even be reached to this line. From the line where the error happened, an error a error would be returned to the operating system from that line itself. It will not even come to this return.
Okay, so that is implicit one, the return.
It is an
in
implicit
between.
one, but you could put it in. Okay. See, that's why C++ wants you to put the return explicitly, just to make this thing clear. See, if I compile it as a CPP program, just see this. Let's say I don't put a return now. See, must return an int. What does it say? It says that your program has to return something so that the OS knows that it has gone through a clean execution.
Okay.
That's the like C++ adds an extra safety, but C does not, because C does this return implicitly from the main without the programmer's knowledge. So even if you put an int return in C, it will work, but even if you don't put, it will also work.
Sir, in some compilers, they only it only accepts return 0. Why is this necessity?
So return 0 might be the correct code. 0 might be the correct code for a clean execution.
So if you return any other integer, it won't work.
I think it should not be that case. I mean, I don't know where you have seen this. I think C. Let me write a C. Let me just change that program back to CPP. And then let me say I have returned something. I am doing this explicit return in a C program. And then instead of 0, let me put something else. Let me put a negative value. Let's see what happens. See, it runs, right? So it doesn't matter what you return. It should be only the thing that it should be the last line in the execute that has happened.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So guys, we are officially at the end of today's lecture. I think I have covered enough. All the basic things that goes in a C program: statements, return, main, include, semicolon. So yeah, I think you know about comments, right? Do I have to explain what are comments?
Yes.
Yeah, comments are some text that you put in your program. That's all. Okay, fine.
So,
yeah.
Other than GCC, what other compilers can we use?
GCC, there is an Intel compiler called IC. I think it's called ICC. It's called, it comes from Intel. Then there is one more compiler called LLVM.
So
there are not many options in a compiler, but yeah, there are a few options.
all of them follow the same standard, right? Or does each one of them publish his own standard for C++?
No, they follow the same language standard.
So like, what's the use? Is there any use of having their
See,
own?
I don't want to. Yeah, so now I will be going into language standards actually. So let me defer to the next lectures because some people would get lost here. What is C99? What is C89? Right?
Yeah.
So I will explain that. I will start with that with the next lecture.
Yes, sure.
Sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
yes.
I have a doubt. C has implicit return statement, like it gives implicit return statement, whereas C++ does not. So isn't it a benefit for C? Because even if you don't,
why is it a benefit? See, CPP is letting the programmer know that you return something from main, and then that means your program is correct. Okay. But C++ C is doing this the programmer doesn't even know that an explicit return is going from the main. So C++ is imposing this safety more, right? Okay. CPP is like, it is giving you maybe a fire extinguisher, and C does not give you the fire extinguisher, something like that. It's more safe.
Okay, fine.
Sir, can you explain the int and void thing once more, please?
See, when you write void, right? When you write void before a function name, I mean, we will be doing this in much details when you deal with functions, but just to remember, just for this lecture, to complete this lecture, void means you have done something in your program, and that function has, you have done something inside a function, and that function has not returned anything. That function does not have to return. Printf is not returning. I mean, as such, you could have a function which just displays something on the terminal. That's it. It doesn't have to return anything to you. So for those functions, you define it as void. That means it is not returning anything back to the.
What exactly comes under returning? Like,
returning could be anything, man. I mean, it could be an integer, it could be a double. I mean, those data types that you see, we will be seeing in C language, right? You could return any of those data types through a return inside a function.
Okay.
Return is the output that you collected from the calculations you did inside a function, and you are passing that output to some other logic, some other part of the logic in your code. Okay. I think I'm done today, guys. So how was the lecture today? Was it clear enough?
Excuse me, sir, I have a